Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? You can unmute yourself and answer if you can hear me. Lovett, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Okay. All right. I will start in earnest. Um, I will share my slide so that you can see what I'm going to be talking about today. All right. Today we'll be talking about the business environment. Remember that earlier we had talked about um, the business and we've introduced the business environment generally, and we tried to talk about the internal business environment and the external business environment. I remember mentioning some key concepts while discussing that particular concept in our first encounter on this particular topic. When we talked about the business environment, we talked about the forces, the influences that characterize the business environment where an organization is operating. Those influences, those forces and influences that act upon the business in the business and in its location where it is operating are those forces that are referred to as the elements of the business environment. All right. So today, last time we talked about the internal business environment, where we mentioned that we had different elements that make up the internal environment. We said the owner of the organization is part of the business environment, the internal business environment. The workers are part of the internal business environment. The work environment, the physical work environment is part of it. The staff, the uh, those within the organization, the tools, which make up the physical environment, are part of the internal physical environment. Now, we also said that today we'll be talking about uh, the external business environment. And this external business environment, we will start today by discussing the political environment. The political environment. Of course, you are not new to politics. I know that in the school where we operate, most of you are part of the SUG, that is the Student Union Government. All right? You're part of the Student Union Government. And I know some of us in our department have contested under that level and have holding positions there. That tells you something about politics. That tells you something about politics. So the political environment is an important dimension of the business environment, especially as we have mentioned earlier, that the political environment is part of the external business environment. Remember, we classified the two of them. We try to differentiate the internal and the external. We said those forces that operate outside the organization that influences the organization are the external environment, the external uh, business environment elements, while the elements within are the internal business environment elements. And now we are talking about political environment, and politics is part of the external business environment. And that dimension of the business environment is quite important that the business enterprise and those that run it understand what makes up the political environment. Now, the political environment is mainly concerned with the type of leadership a nation, a state, a local government, or an environment has adapted. All right. So it's important the organization, the owner understands this adaptation. What kind of leadership is operating within that space? The political environment is an important dimension of the business environment, which affects business enterprises in a number of ways. The political environment is mainly concerned with the type of leadership that is adopted, and key players to that leadership are government and its operators, those that are within the government space. Who is the government of the day? What kind of government is in place. These are the things that should concern every business organization. What kind of government is in place? Politics tend to be associated with activities at the state level, and such activities at that state level involves numerous people that tries to resolve conflict at that level, that tries to make laws at that level, that tries to make sure that society is run peacefully. And that is beautiful. So, as a business organization, how do you resolve understanding the government of the day vis-a-vis the business you are running? So, one of the key things an organization must understand is government is part of the political environment, and the business organization must understand the government of the day. So government pertains to the pursuit and the exercise of power. That is the authority to make decisions, impact the lives of the people, both at the local, the state, national, and international level. All those that are invested with that authority to make power are people that are referred to as government. So you understand in the school environment where we operate that the SUG president has the authority to do certain things. So he represents the government of the students. So also, when an organization is cited within a space, whether it's a local government space, a state space, a national space, the government of the day, those that are vested with the authority to make decisions, to impact the lives of the people, are referred to as the government. All right. So once we have understood this, it's important for us to get this concept clearly and understand how we place it in the context of what we are discussing today. So government also encompasses the institutions through which that power, we talked about power initially. Now, through which that power is formally and legitimately exercised. And such institutions are like the local government council, the cabinet members, the committees, the congresses. We don't use congress here, but some societies use congresses. The Igwe in council. You see that because in the very local and micro level of our society, the Igwes are government. They have the authority to impact the lives of the people. So it's important to understand these things, what government is all about. All right. Now, having said that, governments are typically transient. When we say government is transient, it means that it comes and it goes. So government is not permanent. Of course, you are grown, and you understand clearly that government has come and gone. In our environment, in our state, government has come and gone. By November, we have a new election. We have another election to introduce a new government that is at the state level. And going forward at the local level, and so on and so forth. So government pertains to, first, we say, the exercising of power, and that power comes with authority to make decisions that impact the lives of people, both at the local, state, and national level. Government also encompasses the institutions through which this power is formally and legitimately exercised, which is the councils, the local government councils, the government houses, and the government house and the governors there, the committees, the Igwe council, the congresses. Then we also say government are typically transient, meaning it changes, it comes and goes, and it is composed of individuals or groups who temporarily control the state and then enact the laws that will benefit members of the society. And this reflects the nature of the kind of political system and its approaches to conflict resolution. So if we start discussing this now, it means that we'll have to delve into the next dimension of it, which is how do the government pursue power so it can exercise it? How does government, when it gets that power, what institutions will it use to enforce or legitimize the power? Then thirdly, what group of individuals makes up that government? It is only through the political system we can determine which will happen. So let's go to the political system and see what it is talking about. Now, types of political systems. We have different kinds of political systems. We have the authoritarian political system. In the authoritarian political system, this political system can be led by an individual, for example, a monarch, or another powerful figure, maybe a king. or a group of individuals. We call them political parties, or military junta, when some of our African countries presently have military juntas or military head of state as it stands. And they may be, or they may have come to power through various means, maybe through inheritance, that is Igwes and Obis, that are when their father dies, they take over power from their father and all that through inheritance. So this is what the political system is all about. Or you've come into power through coup, that is military juntas. Or you come into power through election, that is political parties. Once this group of people have come into power, they tend to restrict the participation of others in decision making. Often, they monopolize the process and allowing no opposition in the decision making process. When such conditions prevail, the society is often referred to as a totalitarian society, or when they start using power in a very rash way, we say they're authoritarian in their ways. So we say authoritarian political system is when those that grab power use that power but restrict others or block others from participating or being part of the decision-making process. Another political system is the democratic political system. In the democratic political system, and most of us have experienced this either in a school level, our state and political, and local government and community level. In a democratic political system, conflicts are ideally resolved through rational discussions with solutions accepted voluntarily by all parties to that discussion. Conflict resolution is achieved via political representation. That is, some people will come and represent these people, some people will come and represent other people, and then they will come to a meeting, come to a resolution on things that will be done, how many people will represent us, how many people will go to the polls, who is going to be governor, who is going to be, and then they will vote. There's an agreement, there's a consensus. So conflict resolution is achieved via political representation and accountability, where individual views are represented by elected authorities. So some scholars have said that democracy involves more than just election. It encompasses various institutions and processes that express and implement the people's will. Of course, you cannot have democracy without having an umpire that will stand in the middle without being partisan to conduct an election between the parties that want to contest that election. So democracy has various institutions. So what are the common components of democratic government? And these components include electoral systems, political systems, a representative system, and pressure groups. So you should note these um, four elements. The first is electoral system. The electoral system is organized or organizes elections. They are the body enshrined with the responsibility to organize elections and connects the electorate to the government. Elections empower the electorate to choose their representatives. So it's only through election that people become governors, chairmen, and all that other position, SUG governor and president, and so on and so forth. So the system that ushers in these persons that represents us in these offices is referred to as the electoral system. Now, we also have the party system. In a democracy, you can't just grab power from nowhere. You have to join a party. You have to join the system. That is, the party system is one of the subcontinents of the electoral system. In a true democracy, the party system facilitates the functioning of the political system by presenting candidates to the electorate. While one party system exists in some countries, maybe in the US, where just one, maybe no, US doesn't have one party. I think China is where we have one party system. Countries like Nigeria, where we stay, we have several parties. All right. The US have several parties. The Britain has multiple party system. Like in Nigeria, we have the PDP, we have the APC, we have the APGA, and some of us may have be aware of the new coalition, which is the ADC. Now, they are vested with the power to nominate candidates for the local government elections so they can contest to become government. They are also responsible with the function of presenting candidates for state governors elections and federal elections. So the next type of political system, the next component of political system is a representative assembly. And that is a very key one. What do we mean by representative assembly? All of us cannot, because they say democracy is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All of us cannot just go out there and make laws. All of us cannot just go out there and become governors. All of us cannot go out there and become local government chairman. People have to do this, contest this position, and then contest as well for the House of Representation, the Congresses, and so on and so forth. The representative part, which is the House of Assembly, the Congress, the local government houses of legislation, are referred to as the representative assembly. So they are a key aspect of the democratic government where citizens that are elected, that is elected individuals, are given important role to make decisions on behalf of others. In Nigeria, in Nigeria's federal system, which we operate, representatives are elected at the local, state, and the national levels. Okay? Now, what are the branches of government? You may say, why are we talking about all this? Remember, we are talking about the political environment. For us to understand the Nigerian entrepreneurial environment, we need to understand the political environment. And every entrepreneur must be keyed into this, because as an entrepreneur, you can't function properly without understanding the government, the system in which your business is operating. That is why we're explaining all this. Now, branches of government. These branches or functions of government are what helps the government to work. We have the executive arm, the judiciary, and the legislative arm. Let's explain them a bit so you just get to understand them and how they affect us. We'll finally draw a link between all these aspects of the politics and government to the entrepreneur as we progress. Now, how does it work? We talked about the executive, the judiciary, and the legislation. Now, governing involves both decision making and implementing those decisions to achieve government objectives. So, a task undertaken by the executive branch is to manage the government. The executive consists of a small group of individuals responsible for policy decisions and oversight. So they are the ones that make policies, they are the ones that tries to run the government, like the word executive means, tries to execute government decisions. All right. And this includes political office holders, they are part of this function, and career administrators, they are part of the executive. In a presidential system, the president, elected separately, appoints head of departments, whereas in a parliamentary system, the head of state and the head of government's roles are distinct, with the head of government selecting department heads from the legislative assembly. So you see, different system will determine how the government will run. And once you understand how the system is or what kind of system you are in, you try to understand and know how your business function or concern is affected by it. Now, governing involves not only making and implementing laws, but also ensuring that the application of these laws and the enforcement of these laws are carried out. Now, legal structures, like now talking about the judiciary, legal structures vary from country to country, and they are influenced by history, by culture, and politics. And with some states having unified legal system and others, like the federal system, having parallel courts. Some courts are the local environment, the magistrate courts, we have the high courts, we have the appeal courts, we have several courts at different jurisdictions, they are in different places. All right, they have different law. So then they operate under the federal system. They also operate in different states under that same system, and they have different functions. And their functions are vested in different ways. They are there to enforce, to to adjudicate cases, and the police to help enforce laws that have been set. Now, in a democratic system, judiciary independence is very key. It's a very crucial aspect of the judiciary, and it is crucial so as to protect citizens from excessive state powers. And this is key because, just like we talked about the authoritarian system earlier and the totalitarian system earlier, in a democracy, the judiciary has to be independent. The legislature has to be independent. And this is key because it is what makes that system what it is. But when it is not there, the system breaks down into a totalitarian system where the judiciary serves as only the ruling airlines. That means only those that are in power get justice, others don't get it. So you see, it's no longer a democracy. So this is some of the things we need to understand. Now, what are the checks and balances in a democracy? Democracy entails a system of checks and balances that curtails government excesses, government actions, and limits its influence over citizens' daily lives. Now, these checks are primarily political and social, and in some cases, economic. So political checks and balances arises from one, the separation of power. Separation of power means that in government, not the same people make the law, not the same people enforce the law, not the same people adjudicate for the law, like the judiciary, the executive, and the legislation. That's what we mean by separation of power. And this ensures that the executive, the legislation, and the judiciary branch operate independently. So, and then there's another political checks and balance arises again from what we refer to as the bicameral legislation. What do you mean? What do we mean by bicameral legislation? Bicameral, simply bi means two. Legislation, two. That's two cameras. Like we have the House of Assembly, House of Representation, and the House of Assembly. Two of them, the Senate and the House of Rep. Two laws will pass through the two before they are finally made. This requires both houses to approve legislation, to approve laws, allowing for scrutiny at both levels and amendment by opposition parties at both levels. So this is a check and this is a balance. If they were not there, people become totalitarian and authoritarian. That is, they do what they like. Another political checks and balance arises from the territorial division of power. Through federalism or devolution, distributing authority across national, regional, and local levels is a key to checks and balance. Of course, we know the president can do a lot, but the president is not in charge of the local communities. It's not in charge of states. Though we have an overriding power, but we have what we call territorial division of power, and this is part of the political checks and balances that arises that are in democracy. Then these mechanisms that we've just explained, though not always very perfect, we know where human beings are, there are no perfection there. Though they are not perfect, they are not perfectly implemented. They promote and they reflect delays and consultations, negotiations, and consensus building in decision making. So these things tells you how the government works once you understand these government functionalities and checks and balances here and there. Now, some social and economic checks also exist. Also, social and economic checks and balances, they also exist. Social and economic checks refers to non-state structures. Now, we're not talking of those in power. Non-state structures and processes that limit government influences. These include private businesses, professional associations, promotional bodies, churches, and other groups shaping the economic, social, and moral environment. They say, what do we mean by this? Government has a lot of influence, but we also know that the church has a lot of influence, the mosque has a lot of influence, our professional bodies or associations have a lot of business, private businesses, when they form groups, they have a lot of influences, social groups, they have a lot of influences in how a state works. For example, in the US, whenever there's an election, you will see that they call them pressure groups. Several political pressure groups form groupings contribute monies to support a candidate. Of course, once that starts happening, it affects how they do their business and how they see the government. And these are all checks and balances here and there. Now, in democratic states, most economic decisions are made by private entities interacting through a market system, serving as a counterbalance to the public sector activities. Now, let me use an illustration to explain this. In a democracy, most economic decisions are made by private entities. For example, let's say setting up of a business. Setting up a business like a hospital. For the government, like primary health care, for example, government in Nigeria has decided that every local government, every community will have a one primary health care facility sponsored by the government. So you go to your community, you will see one healthcare, primary healthcare there, maternity or something is there. Now, that's in some community is the only health facility that is there. However, private entities can interact with themselves and consider a particular area and say, wow, there's a lot of patients in these places always trying to come out to the city or this particular region to get health services. And they decide to provide health services in that side. Once they start doing that, they form economic decision in such places. You cannot do something there without involving them because they are part of the economic powerhouses in such places. In big markets like main market, Onitsha, Alaba, in Kano, in Enugu, in different areas, the private businessmen that are in charge of importation are strong influences in making economic decisions in those places. So you see private entities that interact in such places affect the market system and they counterbalance the public sector interference in such places. And this is what we call democracy and political environment. Now, in conclusion, let's start talking about how the political environment affects the entrepreneur. Concluding the examination of the political environment, government decision-making in democracy mirrors organizational models, transforming inputs into outputs while navigating political demands and supports. Government, like other organizations, try to utilize resources such as labor, land, capital, finance, expertise in their policy consideration. All right. So political demands include those impacting business activities, those government activities that impact business activities, such as trying to translate into action through mechanisms such as electoral system. They try to influence business environment through, if I come into power, I will build you a market. If I come into power, I will set up a school. If I come into power, I will do this, I will do that. And party activities are affected, pressure groups are affected, influences are affected, political communication are affected through government demands. Governments claim that electoral victories provide a mandate for their policies, while the support of the political system, customs, convention, rules, and sentiments legitimize the government's action and existence. I mentioned this in our earlier interaction that once an entrepreneur gets influenced by or gets actively involved in politics, it tends to affect how he does his business. Businesses should be careful with politics because the government of the day can affect how you do business to a very large extent. There is a particular environment where a businessman tried to contest and his facility where he does his business had some issues with the government. And those issues from hearsay were not issues until he decided to contest an election. So you will find out that in political system, in the political environment, there are rules, there are sentiments, and there are actions and there are reactions. And all these affects the entrepreneur in various ways. So being I don't know the word to use, apolitical don't belong to any political party is a good one for the entrepreneur, but support the government of the day. In a democratic system, believe in democratic principles underpins or it's the mainstay. It is what gives the government legitimacy. It underpins government activities. What makes government activity legitimate? Because once we lose faith in democracy, democracy fails. Because it's our collective faith in the government that gives them real authority. Now, government outputs, ranging from maybe the public goods that they provide, the services that to rules and regulations, and the transfer of payments that they make, makes the largest business entity a state in a state and influences the environment. Let us take an example to this. When government pays salaries, it activates and triggers economic activities in all the markets. For example, September is around the corner, and we say once it's August, you start hearing people saying back to school purchases, clothes, uniforms, shoes, and all that. These are influences that government triggers. Once government doesn't pay salary for 2-3 months, workers, no matter how it is time to go back to school, the markets are very quiet and nothing is happening. That tells you that government has a lot of economic influences. All right. So government activities involves transfer of payments, and these are influencing the environment, economic environment, and other businesses around the environment. So government is key, and government is part of the political environment. So government decision making is a complex process. This involves various individuals, maybe the groups, market groups, political groups, agencies of government, MDAs, which evolves over time and by issues. Understanding the structure of how government works and the values shaping governmental action is crucial for businesses and students to appreciate and potentially influence the political environment. Studies of political systems and processes provide insight into decision making and the significant influencers, making this knowledge a valuable organizational resource. We have, in this short period of time of talking, I'm the one talking now, discussed the nature and the importance of the political function and how it affects business organization. We have looked into the fact that political system consists of the legislative organs which make the law, the executive functions which implements the law, and then the judicial functions which is concerned with the interpretation of the law, application and enforcement of that same law. These organs make and enforce and implement decisions that could affect business organizations positively or even negatively. And then we also talked about the entrepreneur, understanding the entrepreneurial environment and the political environment, such that his business is not affected by wrong political decision or wrong political influences or wrong political groupings where he will go and group himself with a particular political group and the opposition wins and they shut down his business. So the entrepreneur has to be very careful on how he does his business. Studies have shown that great businesses don't join great business entrepreneurs, businessmen don't, they may like a particular party, but they don't come out and express that this is the party I belong to, but they just support every government in power. All right, that's about what we have to talk about today. In our next class, we'll be talking about the legal environment and what makes the legal environment. Of course, that is a very important one because for you to do business in an environment, you must know what to do and the lines not to cross so you don't go to prison, so you don't violate the law and you are thrown into prison. We'll talk about that in our next class. So for now, it's time to unmute yourself and ask a question. Someone put up his hand or her hand earlier. I can't identify you because your names are not written in as I just see iPhone here. I can't see. I don't know who the person is. So if you have a question, you can easily just ask your question. Unmute yourself and ask, and I will respond to you immediately.
So please, how take our attendance because I don't know.
No, okay. We will take your attendance. All right, some of you are already putting your numbers, and just drop your number there. Don't worry, that is secondary. Understanding what we are saying is more important to me than that. Just put your in the message box, tap your reg number there and your name. That's okay for me. All right.
Okay, sir.
Any other question? All right. If there's no other questions, we'll see on Wednesday. We should have a class on Wednesday. Please do well to come to class, 10 o'clock. All right.
Sir, please, the definition of the introduction of the topic, like the beginning,
Yes.
please, can you come again in that one, please? Don't be offended.
I really don't know what you're asking, but let me try if I do understand. The topic for today is political environment. All right. Now,
Okay.
political environment was not just chosen as a topic for today, it's a subtopic in the external business environment. Remember, we had introduced the business environment generally in class, and we divided it into two: internal business environment and the external business environment. We said that the internal business environment as that's those forces, those influences within the organization that act around the organization. So the external environment is what we are talking about today. So that is the topic. Any other thing?
No, no, sir.
Okay. And we said the political environment encompasses government, the political system, the electoral system, the democratic political system that we use, even the branches of government and how they influence the environment and the businessmen. The executive executes the law, the legislation makes the law, the judiciary tries to enforce it. We talk of how they work, and we talk about the checks and balances in a democratic system, and so on and so forth. So that's about it for today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. If you have a question, send me the question on the WhatsApp page. I will take your questions, and then we take it from there. All right. See you in my